October 2nd, 2024, Social History class, Professor Susanna Kish. The teacher is talking about reproduction being necessary for society's existence. She's showing a population pyramid graphic and explaining that the bottom of the graph shows the youngest people in society. Moving upward, the people get older. Now, a moving graphic shows alternating pyramids and decades throughout the 20th century. During the Second World War, 1939 to 1945, the population of Hungary declined, then bounced back, obviously. The three legs of population are rate of birth, death rate, and migration. Now she's showing another graph that displays the information for the population growth of several Western European nations over 2.5 centuries, from 1700 to 1950 approximately, via percentages. Moving on, she's playing a video of the world map lit up with yellow dots showing spikes of human population through the millennia. It disturbs me Africa isn't lit up as well as other parts of the global south because historically many different peoples inhabited those places. It is a glaring example of European perspective bias that Europe is the most lit up place on the map and other places only get lit up once the timeline corresponds with the quote-unquote age of exploration. I can't wait for the day when I get to teach so I can combat these ideas that seem to be getting passed on to the next generation that still put European existence at the center of study. Now the teacher is fielding questions from the class on reasons why the death rate declined in Europe over the centuries. Reasons provided by my brilliant classmates are improved techniques in medicine, sanitation, education, lack of armed conflict, lower birth rates, etc. The teacher made the point that improved infrastructure helped too. Now she's asking the students why the birth rate in Europe has been declining as well, starting in the late 19th century. Now she's putting both images of the birth and death rate side by side on a line graph with a blue circle over a certain period on each. She then talks about quote-unquote traditional societies where people had many children to support themselves. The quote-unquote opening of the demographic scissor happens when there is a large birth rate and a low death rate or vice versa. She's showing the demographic transition model, DTM, to show quote-unquote regime shift. She's talking about its inventor, Harvard professor Notestein. There are 4 phases in his model where the birth rate and death rate differentiated due to economic reasons. I asked the question about if his model applied to socialist nations because she kept saying his model applied to all societies. She said he didn't have data on that, but for what she knew about socialist Hungary, the same still applies. She's now talking about Princeton professor A.J. Cole, who disagreed with Notestein's notion that pre-industrial societies had as many kids as possible. Cole says that people had a lot, but not the maximum because the birth rate is dependent on, quote, if a society sees not having kids as advantageous, then fertility will decline, end quote. Basically, Cole is saying that cultures, ideas, and taboos dictate when people have kids and how many. Finally, the DTM is saying economics changes the naturally high birth rate, and the EFP, Cole's project, postulates there is no naturally high birth rate and many other factors influence birth rate. I asked the question if Cole's ideas open the door for the reason falling birth rates exist is because, quote, women are realizing men are bad, end quote. She said, surprisingly, yes. Ha 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 ha. Go figure. Anyway, now she's talking about migration from the European perspective on history. She rightly pointed out that migrants to other parts of the world came from Europe mostly due to push and pull factors. It is very disturbing that they are being labeled migrants and not colonialist. Once again, this is Eurocentrism and an example of whitewashing genocide. Many push and pull factors are given, but one I didn't know before is that grain from the U.S. killed the grain farmers in Europe because U.S. grain was cheaper, obviously due to slavery. But the teacher didn't mention that. Now she's fielding questions about why it might be beneficial for a country to send out migrants. Many people in the class are pointing out economic reasons, but I pointed out a country could send their political radicals away like how the Tsar sent Lenin to Switzerland. Some jackass in the back said, yeah, that's a good point about expelling political rivals, not radicals like I said, because Venezuela is opening its prisons to send criminals to the U.S. I said audible enough for the whole class to hear, that's a lie. It was said in a calm tone, followed by, "That's a right-wing fascist lie," in a lower volume, but with the same energy. The teacher said we could handle that outside, but no one stepped to me even though I stayed in my seat for a few minutes after class. One of the Turkish guys asked me what the commotion was about because, like most of the other students here, he was daydreaming. Notes from the Undergrad, Episode 1, Simon Hill.